Hello, my name is Jeremy Farrell. Today we're going to be talking about MIL Standard 1275 and MIL Standard 704 Rev A transients and the compliance to the VPT modules. First, we're going to talk about MIL Standard 1275. Normal operation of MIL Standard 1275 is between 16 and 40 volts. All of our VPT products will operate within this range. However, there are a few transients which our VPT products do not, all of our VPT products do not work. First is the initial surge, which is drawn here behind me. This starts out at 28 volts. When it initially turns on, goes down to 6 volts, and then comes back to 16 volts with a 1-second transient. The only product that we have that will operate through this is the VPT PCM. If you do not need to operate through this, all the other products will turn off during the 6-volt transient and then turn back on, and it's under voltage lockout. The VPT PCM during this transient will initially be running at the 28-volt input, drop down to approximately 20 volts, where it will maintain its output voltage to be 20 volts. Now, when it's 16 volts, it will still be maintaining a 20 volt output. The VPT PCM is meant to go on the front end of any of our converters. The 20 volt minimum will allow any of our converters to operate through this transient. Keep in mind that it's rated for 100 watts maximum output power during this 6-volt operation. The next transient that we need to talk about in MIL Standard 1275 is 100 volt, 50 millisecond pulse from a low impedance source. During this, none of our products will operate through the 100 volt transient. You will have to clamp this to either 80 volts or 50 volts depending on the product that you're using. The only two products that we have that will clamp this is the VPT PCM and the VPT I-10. During this transient, it will maintain an output voltage less than 50 volts, usually about 45 volts. So it will operate at 28 volts, and then during the 100 volt, it will clamp to 45 volts approximately, that will be used for any of the input to any of our DC to DC converters. The next transient will be the 250 volt spike. The last part of MIL Standard 1275 is a 250 volt spike from 15 millijoules. Here on the board I have the envelope of the spike. It can go from positive 250 to minus 250, but it only contains 15 millijoules of energy. This is not a whole lot and can be clamped external. However, internal, the VPT I-10 and VPT PCM will clamp this spike with no additional parts. The final transient that we're going to talk about is MIL Standard 704A. None of the other revisions of 704 have the 80 volt transient. However, some applications still require to meet 704 Rev A. This revision has an 80 volt transient. This is actually drawn on a logarithmic scale. It starts at 80 volts and then starts to break down at 50 milliseconds. At 50 volts, it's down to 1 second and then decays down to 30 volts. Most of our products will operate through this 80 volt transient. However, the DVFL, DVHE, and VPT 100 series will need to have this 80 volt transient clamped. The products that we have to clamp this are the VPT I-10 and the VPT PCM, which will clamp the 80 volts to less than 50 volts. Now we will go to the lab for demonstration. For the lab portion of this presentation, we're going to have two transients. The first is going to be MIL Standard 1275, the initial engagement transient, which will be down to 6 volts. The second will be the 100 volt, 50 millisecond transient. But for both of these demonstrations, we will use the standard VPT PCM module. What we have here is just a standard fixture to plug the unit in. Two power supplies. One is running at 28 volts. The other is running at 6 volts. A constant power load and an oscilloscope to show the output waveforms. First, we will turn the unit on. The output is 28 volts. Turn the load on, and then we can switch to the 6-volt transient. Here you can see the input voltage comes down to 6 volts, where the output of the PCM stays at 20 volts, which is plenty enough margin to run any of our VPT power supplies. For the second part of this demonstration, we're going to show the mil standard 1275 100 volt 50 millisecond pulse applied to the same VPT PCM module. The setup is a 28 volt power supply, a 100 volt power supply, and a constant power load, just like the previous demonstration. Cut both of these on. It is operating at 28 volts. When I apply the 100 volt and the load, the output waveforms are shown on the scope. Here the input voltage is 100 volts and the output of the PCM is clamped at 43.6 volts, which will operate all of our standard products. Thank you.